The Treaty of Versailles ended the fighting, but it did not bring true peace. Dismantled for great empires, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Ottoman, and Russian, it drew new borders in the Middle East and Europe with a pen and a ruler, ignoring the people living there. The trauma of the Great War changed everything, from how we write poetry to how we view government. The seeds of the next global catastrophe were sown in the very soil where the first one ended. By 1917, the world was reaching its breaking point. Internal exhaustion led to the Russian Revolution, pulling the massive Eastern giant out of the war and birthing the Soviet Union. For a moment, Germany saw a window for victory. They launched the Spring Offensive, a desperate last roll of the dice. But the arrival of fresh American troops and the internal collapse of the Central Powers turned the tide. On November the 11th, 1918, at the 11th hour of the 11th day, the guns finally fell silent. While millions suffered in the mud, the war expanded into new dimensions. Beneath the Atlantic, German U-boats practiced unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting any ship bound for Britain. This invisible threat would eventually draw the United Kingdom's cousin, the United States, into the fray. Above, the Knights of the As 1916 approached, the war evolved into a gruesome competition of industrial output. It was no longer just about soldiers, it was about who could produce more steel and high explosives. At the Battle of Verdun, the longest battle of the war, the French and Germans fired over 30 million shells at each other. The landscape was so pulverized that it remains scarred to this day. This was the debut of the Steel Storm, where human flesh met the cold, indifferent force of industrial machinery. The war wasn't just fought on the plains of Europe. The Ottoman Empire's entry into the war expanded the fronts from the Middle East to the Caucasus. In 1915, the Allies reached the Dardanelles to capture Istanbul and provide aid to Russia. However, they met a resistance they never expected. Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal and his soldiers defended not just a front, but the honor of a nation. Gallipoli became home to one of the bloodiest yet most gentlemanly battles in history. The generals thought the war would be over by Christmas. It took only a few months for them to realize how wrong they were. Massive trench lines were dug, stretching from the Swiss border to the English Channel. The trenches weren't just defensive lines, they were living hells. Knee-deep mud, the trench foot, disease, and the constant threat of a shell falling on you at any moment. Soldiers sacrificed thousands of their comrades in the no man's land, just to gain a single meter of ground. Voiceover. It all began on June the 28th, 1914, in Sarajevo, with 2 gunshots. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip. Voiceover. It all began on June the 28th, 1914, in Sarajevo, with 2 gunshots. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist, Gavrilo Princip. Voiceover. The summer of 1914. Europe was experiencing one of its most peaceful and prosperous eras. Art was flourishing, and technology was making the world smaller. No one could have predicted that in just a few weeks, this golden age would transform into a massive graveyard.